work and like I need to put this shit on Do Not Disturb.
It's not coming through SMWC yet, but
yeah, no, it's thinking about it. Yeah, it's thinking about it.
Oh, there it is. There it is.
There we go. That's what you love to see. That's what you love to
Where's the
see.
music, Bailey?
Say that again.
Where's the music, Bailey? Come on.
Intro music.
I didn't have the intro music queued up. I thought Scotty was hosting us.
One job.
Oh, always gets it wrong.
I'll get it more organized next time. And Scotty, when you're ready, you lead us in.
This is officially, there's only about 4 people in an elevator in Sydney at the moment. So with this elevator, this is the biggest virtual elevator in the country at the moment.
Works well. Excellent. All right.
Ready, when you're ready, Scotty.
Yeah, whenever you're ready, Scotty.
Everyone here for another. When I'm ready, what?
Have we lost Scotty already?
Stand by.
Ooh.
Tech issues.
Strong start.
How's everyone's week been so far?
Yeah, good.
And no, I'm not doing a management wrap up of all that.
Yeah. It sounds like you are. I
haven't seen your faces all week.
What are your best wins and losses this week?
Yeah, tell me your numbers. I'm looking at the top line figures. We can see.
Top line doesn't tell you everything.
No, but the profitability percentages do, and we've done it.
Okay, profitability percentages do tell you a lot.
P.S. Can someone? Oh shit! I've got to be PG, don't I? I'm like, with the way Scotty's frozen right now. Can someone draw something?
I'm totally photoshopping his face on this one. Don't worry. We've lost a bit of Scotty here.
Oh, and we're at a 7:30 p.m. I need to put it to PG, don't I?
Well, that's up to you. Look, I'm going to introduce the stream because we're live and people are actually watching. Don't worry. Oh, and I'm getting feedback through Scotty's mic as well.
Oh, and we're at a 7:30 p.m. I need to
Okay, we're getting feedback through Scott's microphone. This is an excellent start to Roundtable Week 11.
I just need to get a photo of this so I can make.
I can't actually mute him. This is why I suggest that I host, but okay.
That's it. Get rid of Scotty. He's already out. Naughty corner.
He's failed with tech again.
Are we still getting feedback or are we okay? It sounds like we're okay. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Whisky Roundtable Week 11, Week 12, somewhere around there. I always get that part wrong because it's been about that many. We're joined again, of course, with our regular guests, Andy Milne from Southtrade, Alex Dahlenburg from Speakeasy, myself from the Scotch Malt Whisky Society. But we always like to have a special guest on. And by the way, and Scott Fitzsimons from the Oak Barrel. But who knows what his internet's doing? It's Oak Barrel internet. It's renowned for being terrible. However, which is the opposite of their range and service. There you go. Hey, no, but welcome, Joel Robertson. Joel is the head distiller at Boatrocker Brewery and Distillery. We always like to have a special guest on, so welcome, Joel.
Thank you. How's it going, guys?
Good. And we are live. There's people tuning in on the Society stream. I'm sure they are on the Oak Barrel stream as well, but it's anyone's guess because it's Oak Barrel Internet. If this all gets sort of shafted in a moment and we all get shifted over to a new stream, I'll be disappointed because I'm not doing that introduction again. How are we all going?
Yeah, very well. Been a busy week.
Busy week already. It's already Wednesday. Oh, yeah.
I know. It's non-stop at the moment. COVID's turned into a workaholic session. So
yeah, right. And are you guys producing anything except welcome back, Scotty.
That was really bizarre, that one. I could see and hear everything. I was just frozen with my mouth open.
Yeah, no, we saw. It was great.
Do you know how hard it is to hold that pose for 60 seconds without breathing?
I have a photo of it, so I'll be doing some edits to it later on as well.
That's good fodder for the after party. Very good fodder for the after party.
Joel, you were saying that you said you're very busy at the moment. Are you guys producing anything except sanitizer, or are you guys back into some sort of swing, or what?
We did sanitizer for about 3 weeks. Beyond that point, it became very much apparent that wasn't sustainable, and we'd received warning of the market pending flooding from overseas markets being imported at long last. So we gave that one away pretty early. Yeah,
it's funny. I think we're already starting to see a proper sanitizer glut.
Yeah. I
It's
mean, Mjolner stepped into the game with their own thing. There was just market correction from imports making their way through customs, basically, I think.
Mm.
And so even Mjolnir are making their own brand, are they?
We've seen evidence of a brand that's been produced solely by them, yes.
Wow.
It's not Mjolnir brand, it's something else. Like, the name escapes me. It's been a few weeks. But yeah, that was an interesting development. It was very, very difficult to get spirit from them for a while, and then we found out why.
So for everyone watching, can you give us sort of the lay of the land of Boatrocker? What is it? How long has it been around, and what does your role entail, really?
So Boatrocker has actually been around since 2009. It's one of the oldest breweries in the craft beer boom of current. Since 2009, seen a lot of changes, of course, but from the get-go, it set out to rock the boat, as it were. So barrel-aged sours predominantly, lambic, faux lambics, any kind of mixed culture sour beers. And through the ages, of course, coming up to like the landmark releases of Ramjet Imperial Stout, and really just focusing on barrel-aged beers at the core of the business and identity of the business.
I think my first exposure, I'd like to ask everyone else here, my first exposure to Boatrocker as a brand was actually because, I mean, if you rewind 5, 6, 7 years or something, I was fascinated by the trajectory at the time, and still am, of Starwood. As a whiskey brand, it sort of went, oh, okay, like, and I saw this Boatrocker matured in ex-Starwood barrels, and I was like, okay, I've never heard of Boatrocker at the time. It's like, we're talking 6 years ago or something.
Yeah,
I've heard of Boatrocker.
2014, that's when it first came to the fore. I discovered the same way up in Brisbane. So there you go.
Very cool.
Yeah, that's how I first came across Boatrocker as well. I got into craft beer about sort of like 8 or 9 years ago, well before I was in here at the Oak Barrel. And to be honest, I got really hopped out during that period because it was just hops. And so I was like, actually, I'm not really enjoying this. I'm just drinking it for the sake of it. So I, jumped out of that. At the time, I was getting big into whiskey as well. And then came back and there was a couple from Bridge Road doing some like cognac barrels and that sort of stuff. And then, the Ramjet and, all the Boatrocker Starwood cast, that was my re-entry into craft beer, so to speak.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Everyone's got their own perspective. I think Boatrocker's captured a lot of imaginations for different reasons. I know Miss Pinky being like that landmark light sour on the national scene. I can recall having that 5 years ago or more in Brisbane, and it really rocking me. So...
yeah, I get it.
How long have you been with Boatrocker?
I joined just under a year ago, so I'm pretty fresh on the scene. As a distillery, it's only been as such for not quite 4 years. So Hippocampus came over from Perth in 2017 with then distiller Lex Polson. He's gone on to Gospel Spirits. And I joined, just under a year ago. And it's been a busy time since. We've actually rebranded the core gin range as Boatrocker Gins, which were picked up by Dan Murphy's quite recently. So the volume's expanded rapidly. And of course, a wide array of barrel-aged spirits coming out at this point in time too. So not just rum, we're moving into whiskey quite heavily at current right now. And looking forward to the future and getting some new releases out very soon.
You're on a whiskey roundtable, so that's going to be the question. I mean,
what are you making?
Just before we go down that road, though, I'm doing something right now that I've never done on a whiskey roundtable before, which is actually drinking a beer. Brilliant. Which is something called the Squeeze Box from Boatrocker.
Good old Squeeze Box.
It's trying to convince me that it's lemon lime bitters. We have craft beer experts here at the Oak Barrel, a couple of them. They are not me. So right now I've got Saison aged in Chardonnay barrels. That's a good idea. Barrel aging, always a good idea. Mm-hmm. With Brettanomyces and Pediococcus. So I think Brettanomyces was Triassic period and Brettanomyces was Jurassic period that they roamed the land. Flavour is reminiscent of lemon, lime, and bitters. So what the hell am I drinking?
That's an oldie but a goodie. It definitely predates me. I think the last release of that beer was 2017. I've had a couple that I found lying around and thought it was quite different. not much else I can say on what you've already added. So
it's pretty tasty.
Yeah,
My only
very
complaint is
refreshing.
it's 6.4%, which is about 40% lower than what it should be ideally. 46.4 would be excellent. And speaking of just quickly new distilleries, a quick g'day to Michelle and/or Mark Burns jumping in on the Facebook there. Some big things coming from people with the last name Burns at the end of the year from distillery-wise. But I just wanted to get that beer reference out of the way because this may never happen again.
It's not just the first time you've ever had a beer on Roundtable. It's actually, I can safely say, in the 10 plus years I've known you, this is the first time I think I've ever seen you having a beer full stop.
Oh no.
No, Reshes, lots of Reshes.
Okay, well, lots of Reshes, but that was that's a while ago. A bit. Lots of silver bullets, sure.
Yeah. But I did. Yeah, I mean, I tried to get back into craft beer when I started the Oak Barrel 5 years ago because there's so much of it, and I there's no time, with
there isn't.
looking after the spirits, as I'm sure Joel, you're from Boatrocker. Oh, great! Tell me about all the beers. Well, actually, there's a fair bit else to worry about.
Yeah. No, I'm lucky. I'm around a lot of it. The beer and the spirit side, though we are in separate buildings, we overlap constantly. I'm of course producing whiskey wash or vodka wash or the like alongside them all the time, and our packaging lines overlap completely. So very much into the beer side of the company as well.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
How'd you get into distilling?
I actually have a bit of a food science background. I worked in a food laboratory for many years up in Brisbane, and it really just started as a garage passion project. Turned into a startup, actually. So there's a little company called Art of Booze still going up there. I was with them for a few years. Some other guys, a bit of a hospitality startup, which was going to be a brew pub 5 years ago, then became a distillery. The burgeoning Tassie whiskey scene, I guess, inspired us at the time, and wanting to do alternate whiskies like over in America, like Corsair Artisan Distillery. They were a big influence on me and them. We did some distilling of whiskey down in Adams Distillery when they were just starting up in 2016. I believe those barrels have been relinquished back to Brisbane. They haven't been released to the public yet, though. They're still in finishing phase, I believe. But I left back in 2018 to go to Archie Rose and spent around a year there, and then came to Boatrocker just under a year ago.
Very cool.
Yeah.
What do you drink at home?
Honestly, not that much at the moment. I've been trying to be well behaved. Look, I've got a wide array of things. There's a ton of barrel-aged sours, of course, from work. I've got a little bit of whiskey. I've been huge into mezcal the last couple of years. It's kind of like my unicorn spirit. I want to make it and I can't because it's just a difficult thing to get hold of in Australia agave, isn't it? But look, that's one for the future for me. If I can make it in any way, shape or form, I will. So we'll see what happens.
Aussie agave.
Well, we've actually had our first shipment.
Yeah, there are. There's a couple on the scene. Look,
and there's a Pechuga as well that's about to go up online in the next couple of days. An Aussie Pechuga.
Excellent. Yeah, I think I heard wind of this or caught wind of this. What are they called again? The name?
So Black Snake.
That's it, Black Snake. Yeah.
About 7 hours that way.
Yeah, in New South Wales. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm excited to see what they're doing. It's all very interesting.
I just want to know. I'd love for an Australian distiller to try and make Sotol or Sotol. I don't know how you, but Sotol spirit, because it's I've tried a Texan Sotol spirit a couple of years back. It was incredible stuff. Like it's flavors that I've never seen in any spirit before, which was, and no one's tried it here to my knowledge anyway. So probably not. If there's only been 2 agave and whatnot, but yeah.
Yeah. Oh, look. Alternate spirits is what I hope to be about in the future. It's going to definitely be an aim. Anything we can really tackle, we'll try.
Joel, just on that. Sorry, Alex, did you want to go first?
No, you go.
Well, I might have missed this while I was catching flies in my mouth for 5 minutes beforehand. But when people,
it's not flies, mate.
It's not 8 o'clock yet. It's still PG, but definitely PG 18 plus because we're booze. So But when people think about Boatrocker and they come on this stream and they see Robertson Boatrocker, they're not immediately going to think spirits. And even, the vodka Hippocampus doesn't carry the Boatrocker name. So outside of the gin that we've seen a bit in Melbourne, it's in a few places in New South Wales, but obviously going through the change now, it's going to be a little bit more prominent. But what spirits does Boatrocker make, and like, obviously, it's the Hippocampus as well that is now your responsibility. But like, is there, and maybe not things that are on the market yet, but things that are being laying down at the moment?
Yeah, so at current, and there was actually a previous release before I arrived on the scene, rum. So rum was the first barrel-aged spirit foray. Some of that began even back in Perth, so before Hippocampus joined us. So we've actually had releases that date back to that point in time. We have a lot of new rum coming soon, and whiskey. So there's been one whiskey release, Forget Me Not beer whiskey, that was distilled from Alpha Queen. That was one of the first releases.
I remember the Forget Me Not. It was like a little bottle.
That's right. Yeah.
Bizarre, wasn't it, by taste from memory?
It was quite bizarre. It was like and it was actually one of those things that it stirred up heaps of like comments online. Is it actually whiskey?
Well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Purists and such. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
was that a hopped? Was that a hopped whiskey?
Technically, yeah, because it was Alpha Queen. Because we just took a landmark beer of ours and distilled it. Yeah.
I remember you referencing Corsair. I remember years ago, just as we were bringing them into the UK, I was asked to go and man a stand for them at a show. And I remember trying their range there, and it was, weird. And I think they were very much in the early stages of developing at that point, but they had a very similar product that was hopped whiskey. And it wasn't quite right. I think of the range, that was the one that they kind of had not quite nailed. Yeah. But there was definitely a sense of you could taste in the range. They knew what they were doing. That one just hadn't quite worked.
Didn't quite hit the mark.
And I was always intrigued. It's like, is this because hops don't work in whiskey, or because it's just you have to play with them? But then
I'm throwing hops willy-nilly at a whiskey as such. If it's already been brewed as a beer, that's a different story. Hops are very difficult on their own, though. You have to be very careful.
And I just applaud, Joel, I don't know if you were involved with that being quite new, but just the whole Boatrocker team for treating a beer the way it's meant to be treated, and that is taking that beer and throwing it through a still and then into some barrels. So often I find that brewers around the country, lovely people making some excellent brew, and then they just forget that last step to carry it through.
It's a crucial one, isn't it? Yeah.
Put it through a bit of a copper kettle, chuck it in some barrels you got lying around, and just finish the process. So congratulations to you and the Boatrocker team for getting it right. Thank in that
you.
case.
I'll pass on the good news.
Yeah.
I have two
and my allocation of beer will go, shunk, done. No dram jet for you this year.
Good old dram jet.
Tell me about Nodka.
Oh, you heard about that? Interesting. Look, Nodka was an idea that just blew up.
2 seconds. It's GNODKA.
That's correct.
That's the spelling of it.
That's correct, yes.
All right, continue. Sorry, just for all.
Yeah. It was just an idea that happened one day, and it got out of control very quickly.
Okay, sorry. With all love and respect, how the hell does that happen? You want to tell everyone what it is?
So basically,
what it is, yeah.
It is a vodka. It's a botanical vodka, but it's first and foremost a vodka. It was actually distilled from gnocchi, so from potato gnocchi.
Okay,
it's a potato vodka, but with botanicals.
Basically, yes. Look, it started off as a collaboration idea. I moved to Melbourne last year, of course, and quickly became a huge fan of the 48H restaurant, who are renowned for their pizza and gnocchi. They're actually been named Best in Australia twice. And look, culinary collaborations are always great. A couple of our products started off as a collaboration with a restaurant, and it just seemed like a good idea at the time. A very messy idea, as it turns out. But look, pretty happy with the results. Just a very smooth, textured spirit.
Were they like catering a wedding or something that then cancelled? And then immediately calling up people was like, mate, we got 17 tons of gnocchi. We got no idea what to do with it.
It's a bit like that, isn't it? No, they actually make everything in-house, so they're almost set up to do such a thing. They create 400 kilos, I think, of hand-rolled gnocchi every week. So it's a bulk operation.
Okay.
400 kilos a week, right?
It's a really interesting concept. And I know, again, thank you, Alex, for while I was MIA a few months ago, is jumping in with the oak barrels, tasting with Miles Munro for the Westwood Distillery in Portland, Oregon.
Do that.
And I'm very fascinated about that concept of craft brewers coming into whiskey, bringing in different ideas to, because when we talk about Scotch whiskey, which is, we make single malt predominantly in Australia, no one's talking about yeast and fermentation. They're talking about barrels and that sort of thing.
Yes.
To have
Talking about
that concept in America, where it's all about that craft brewing scene, that's a really interesting concept for me moving forward in the Australian whiskey industry. Going, no distiller that had come from Scotland is going to think about distilling gnocchi, but a craft brewery who does whatever this is, and pineapple, pecan, surprise, gyoza, barrel aged, whatever's, they're going to go, okay, yeah, we can distill gnocchi. That's a good idea. So I find that quite an interesting concept. And Joel, having worked at, Archie Rose, a distillery that is a distillery, moving to someone like Boatrocker, which comes from, the beer end, was there anything that surprised you about maybe the focus or the end result in terms of what you were allowed to do, or what ideas were being thrown around?
Definitely a lot more open where I am now. I think I've been given a pretty free creative license, which is great. That's why I guess things like AnCnoc have happened, mainly because I can, and we're allowed to just sort of break barriers and try new things. And we have the equipment and knowledge, thankfully, which is a great help. There's a lot of big brains around when it comes to things like fermentation, like you said. So yeah, no, it's definitely the place to be when it comes to innovation, for me at least.
Alex, sorry, was that something you were?
I was about to say, speaking of equipment,
Yes.
talk me through your stills.
Oh, so just the one still. We've got a 450 litre dual column Carl.
Yeah.
So the capability to do a great many different things on that. Neutral spirit rectification, of course, with all those plates, but full pot distillation as well.
Yeah.
So it's great for rum, it's great for gin, it's pretty decent for whiskey. I think in the future we do have plans to branch out on that side of things, but that's a bit of a way down the line yet.
Yeah. Okay.
Quick shout out to friend of the stream, friend of the Oak Barrel, Mark Westmoreland, all the way up in Thurso in Scotland from the Wolfburn Distillery. Good to see you tuning in again, mate. And hopefully you can come visit us again in the very near future. But just evolving on that, obviously, Carl, column still, that craft beer spirit. I'd like just drill down on that sort of mentality a little bit more, because even like a gin or a vodka takes a little while to come to market. And, if you'll make even like a vodka, the recipe needs to go right, still runs need to go right, cut points, all that sort of thing. It takes a little while. Whereas in beer, if you're a brewery, you can have, 20 different lines every week if you've got the man hours to do it. So is there a different mentality for someone like for you, from a brewery point of view, that has never said, this is a good idea? Is it really a good idea because it's going to take 4 or 5 years to get to fruition, where it, instead of 4 or 5 weeks?
Yeah, true. With aged spirits, it is a lot more difficult to know where things are going to end up than with beer. Look, things at the moment are a little bit more conventional. We're not going too crazy. We're being too out there with the barrel-aged spirits. The rum, on the other hand, is going a bit crazy in terms of ferments, Hogo, Jamaican style. But with the whiskies, we're being a lot more conventional. So for me, at this time, I've got American grists, I've got rye, I have like a bourbon style. There's other whiskies that are kind of based on a stout grist. So they're fairly conventional, at least in terms of Australian whiskies. And I think in the future, we'll go and do some more inventive things in that area. But for the time being, we just kind of create things that are more accessible and people will understand without being too challenged.
I think your spirit animal, Mr. Peter Bignell, who is also a fan of weird shit, who's just jumping in on the live stream there. So g'day to Hollywood. And he's worked with a bit of hopped,
Yes.
grain / wash / spirit in the past, which is quite interesting.
Bailey, do you want to jump in?
What was that?
Do you want to jump in for your question?
I was just gonna actually ask a question from the comment stream. I was gonna say a big shout out to Pete, Darren, Stu, Zeno, Tim, Dave. Zeno asks, with that still that you mentioned before, the column still, is that like he asks, is that one where you can remove the plates to make whiskey?
Absolutely, yeah. We can bypass whichever point we wish, basically. So it can be a full pot distillation, or
So you're using the column as a swan neck?
Well, in a manner of speaking, yes. When all plates are open, it ends up becoming a very tall, thin column and swan. In a manner of speaking, it's not quite the same. So you're expecting a lighter spirit as compared to, I don't know, a classic example of a shorter, fatter column. And
So we're talking about the brewers as distillers. I think it's kind of something that I saw a lot from the UK distillers and American distillers. The guy from English Whiskey Company, David, he's come from a brewing background as well. So it's not necessarily just these sort of brand new distilleries that are doing sort of young brewers come along. It was a really kind of interesting mix of different businesses that I think are sort of starting to pick out more brewers over distillers. Scotland less so, obviously.
Yeah.
But the way that they then play around and use grain actually was fascinating. I think take away the hot parts, but actually just talk about how we're using different types of grain and how we're blending and things. English Whiskey Co. did a 4-grain whiskey that was stunning, and it was all of a sudden there's just these different layers of flavor and different characters of depth, and it's something that should be so fucking obvious. We're 7:58, we're almost there. It should be so obvious that we should do this, but we don't, and it's why it's Scotland has that mentality of like, well, why are you doing this? It's like, because I already have. I've always done this, so why change? But are you playing around in that same sense and experimenting with grain, or are you kind of not stuck, the wrong word, but you kind of picked a focus already for what direction you want to go?
Risks are always interesting. I think my main focus at this stage is ferments. I was actually talking about this very same topic that you were just mentioning, Andy, today with a technical salesman from a yeast company who was saying,
what a job.
What that business card.
Technical salesman of a yeast.
He is my ultimate dinner party guest.
Yeast are us, technical salesman, Scott Fitzsimons.
Can we have his number?
Maybe when we get off the live stream. I don't want to out him because he was saying some interesting things. But definitely that the distilleries that he'd been to in Australia that had a focus on brewers in their workforce were producing the most interesting things and the most consistent things, in his opinion.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. I mean, especially, it's that whole thing. I mean, it could be him also wanting to sell more yeast.
Of course. It's a very controversial thing, but it's, it's an interesting viewpoint.
It's a good viewpoint because I don't know about the workforce argument towards it, but I do know that it's, every distillery, I think that so far that has focused a little bit more on the development of their spirit from a beginning standpoint, rather than, hey, this is the blackest casks of the blackest spirit and the blackest history. It's kind of a bit like,
who could you be talking about? Yeah.
No, I could be naming, that could be like, honestly, I could be naming 30 different distilleries of that sort of approach, but it's sort of like this approach of where it's like, it's all about the cask. And we've seen that really negatively sometimes, but also and worked in different ways with how that spirit is packaged and sold. Yeah,
no, that's very true. Oh, look, I'd always like an emphasis to be on all stages of a process and aging as well. It's not just the distillation, it's not just the barrel aging, it's also that initial ferment and those precursors that you've produced. So it's good to have control over all points.
It's really interesting that, like, going back to the Westwood example I used, that when we sort of said, we asked them, was like, why are you in Australia at such a young age, or like in your whiskey cycle? And they were like, we can sell everything in the States, but we think that Australia just gets what we're talking about. Like Scotland, single malt, not always. America, being a single malted America is a bit tough, but the Australia has that same identity that is quite interesting. But I mean, I'm still getting over the concept of having yeast KPIs in your life. Like, that's just such an amazing concept. A quick comment from Mark Westmoreland from the Wolfburn Distillery. Although making whiskey is about consistency, once you know the process, it's repeat. I know there's a fiercely independent distillery where Wolfburn love to experiment with different cashes and now finishes. And I think it's just a different mentality. Like, they've got a consistent product, then they mess around it when they've got it to there, rather than, and it's Thursday, it's bloody cold.
It's pretty fair. The amount of time, and more so in Scotland, your experimentation spans a long time, and so you can get 10 years down the line and realize that it's pointless and hasn't really got that far. So it's sort of, I think your scale and size kind of dictates that probably, because I'd be furious if you were the owner and you've gone, let's give this a punt and see how this goes, and you've laid it all down, and then down the line you've got no stock to sell because it hasn't worked.
It's funny you say that, Andy. I was someone who shall also, in Joel's case, someone who shall also remain anonymous, who owns a distillery in. Well, look, he owns a distillery, and he was saying that innovation, for the sake of innovation, is a total waste of time and money. And it's like, and the way it sort of phrased is like, that's quite interesting, because it's like, if like you say, if you take a punt on these things, and what's the benefit to the core range? What's the benefit to creating a consistent product? It doesn't really make any sense, and it's putting a few casks here and there in Russian ice wine staves and with wacky ferments. Sure.
And even once you've found your niche, or found your sort of skill set, even then with your innovation, it's completely right. I wrote with a brand where we were talking about innovation, and we realized, why are we doing this? Am I getting loads of feedback from?
Yeah, I'm getting loads of feedback as well.
From somewhere.
And if you step it up, don't you just finish it in a sherry cask?
Yes, correct.
No.
Red wine casks for good whiskey, sherry casks to cloud bad whiskey. But there's just a couple comments on the Facebook page here, and like a little bit on what Mark from Wolfburn said. Like, they've nailed the spirit that they want, and then they experiment with the casks. And Paul Downey, who you might know, some people might know as my boss, so I'm going to be very careful. He's talking about sake, and so they talk about like the difference between the rice strain and the yeast strain give flavor and aromas and that sort of thing. But then maybe in Australia we looked at the different way in terms of Westwood again. I'm going to pick on them for a little bit more. They're going to use the same sort of barrels, Virgin Oak American casks. So it's all about experimenting at the front. And then they get all the different yeast strains and all the different, aromas from fermentation, then mess around with all the different barrels. It's going to be a mess. It's like, a Negroni. You got three key ingredients. You can probably mess around with one or two of them, but if you mess around with all three, you're probably going to have a bad time. So it's just a different mentality of, what is your stable element? And then you mess around with the bit that you can experiment with, rather than messing around with everything and it all falling over.
Well, look, as a scientist, I have to agree. It's always good to change one variable at a time. Otherwise, you lose track of everything.
So, Joel, talk us through that process that you went through putting down the whiskey, or what you're currently putting down.
Yeah, look, at the moment, like I said before, working with fairly straightforward stout-like grists, mainly based on fairly famous barrel-aged imperial stout that we're known for. So we'll be seeing something coming from that in at least a couple of years. Going down the line further, I think those casks, once the whiskey has been decanted, will be fed back into that same program. So that's just speculation, of course, but we may be feeding Ramjet back in on itself, which would be exciting.
Yeah, right.
Very cool.
Yeah, so Ramjet whiskey, quite possibly in a few years, that's going to be when we talk about things like a consistent house whiskey, that kind of product, that's the kind of direction we're heading.
And how long have you been putting down whiskey?
Me, myself, since I walked in the door. Yeah, I mean, we're going hell for leather with a wide range of products right now. But look, doing as much as we can when we can. COVID's actually been a bit of a blessing in disguise for us. Before the Dan's gin boom hit, we were putting away quite a bit of new make. So, yeah, we'll see what we can bring to you from 2022 onwards.
And what's your capacity look like there? I'm just out of interest.
Right now, we're at capacity. I think we did a count recently of everything going on. It's around 360 barrels at current. Vast majority of that is beer, of course, but the spirits are growing by the day. So we're actively looking to expand at the first opportunity.
Liters per...
Oh, I couldn't tell you that kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all mixed up in a lot of different SKUs. So I haven't actually looked at all of them at one time.
Mm-hmm.
Something I wanted to ask as well earlier. Sorry, Alex, if you were to jump in there.
Okay.
No, I was just going to
call you a nerd.
I was just going to ask about sort of like, it's not really a distiller question, but it's kind of like it'd be sort of a boat rocker question in general. How do you go about sort of challenging? I mean, do you know how the distillery goes about challenging things like limited regionality of interest in product? Now, what I mean by that is like you see often, like you see a lot of Victorian distilleries in Victoria. You see a lot of New South Wales distilleries in New South Wales. Like and even on the big end of town, I mean, like you don't see a lot of Starwood in Sydney. You don't see a lot of Archie Rose in Melbourne.
That's true. I have noticed that. I often ponder that one myself, and I don't really have an answer to it because if those big companies don't, which it seems like they don't, I'm not sure. Maybe they do know. It's definitely a bit of a sales question, though, and I stay in my lane. I don't pretend to know about these sorts of things. Regionality of products is seemingly very real, though. It's a good question.
And do we have it?
Does such a thing exist?
Yeah, like in Australia, is it?
Definitely. Absolutely. Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's in the beer side, in that arena, there are a lot of great breweries where I come from. I can barely see a single can in Melbourne. There are many great breweries in Melbourne that I never heard of until I moved here because I just simply never seen them. I think the same goes for spirits, though on the new craft front, I think a lot of support is given nationwide. Oak Barrel, definitely. There are other equivalents like Whisky and Ailment and other whiskey bars down here that do tend to have a pretty comprehensive coverage. Bad Frankie's, of course. So there are exceptions. I think spirit-wise, we're going pretty well. I really have no complaints about regionality there. It's more something that's noticeable in beer, I think.
Yeah,
I think that we see that very, very visibly here. Not so much in what we're trying to stock, but in what people want to buy.
Yeah, really.
Something like gin. It is far easier to sell a gin from Sydney than from Melbourne.
Yeah, that's true.
When it comes down to like exact same specs, and there's so much gin in the country that it is often there is a like for like. But happens a lot in wine.
With juniper.
Yeah. Yep. A lot of wine, and it happens in beer. It's sometimes for us, it's hard to get access to Boatrocker beer because they can sell everything to Melbourne. It's their computer. And I totally get it. There's breweries in Sydney, wineries in New South Wales, distilleries in Sydney that do the exact same thing. I totally understand why it happens. But yeah, it is, I think it's across the board, not just in craft spirits, that regionality, and it's driven by the consumer.
Yeah, true. I think it is.
It absolutely is. And it's a good example would be, I don't know how many people in Adelaide drink Hunter Semillon. As you know what I mean? Like it's the regionality exists in wine and beer and spirits and everything, but on a sales level. But
I think it's driven partly by what's available to you when you've got so much there. Then as a stockist, you want to support as many people locally as you can, but also there's a pride element to it as well. I mean, like I always remember going into this store in France. I think it was in Bordeaux. And there was a good 30 meters worth of shelving, and it was just all this amazing, Bordeaux wines. And then at the end, there was a section from the rest of the world, and it was 6 bottles of wine, and they were representing Australia with Jacob's Creek, America with Gallo.
One for the good guys.
It was just like, here's 6 bottles. That's the world, according to us.
Yeah, and like from a a retail point of view, and as a we want to support the local suppliers, but I think there's also from the producer's point of view, and like Boatrocker is a great example of this. There's so many really limited beers, that are X amount of cases. If 1 or 2 come to the Oak Barrel, and then there's other equivalent stores in Sydney, so all of a sudden that might be 5 or 6 cases going to New South Wales to Sydney. Is that 5 or 6 bottle stores in Victoria that are missing out? And from Boatrocker's point of view, or anyone's from that point of view, where does a producer sit in that moment to go, well, hold on, like these guys have supported us from day dot, not once we got famous and the rest of the country figured it out, and they're more likely to send us down people who are going to come visit the brewery tours, the distillery tours, the wine cellar door. So I totally understand from their side as well that argument.
Yeah, there's a comment from Darren Howie here that says, is regionality an issue based off our limited population? He asks, and with people breaching regionality are those with broader tastes and knowledge, which in a small population base is limited to begin with. It's a good point. I mean, even I was going to remark before about last time I was in Adelaide, I wandered past this little independent bottle shop. Didn't wander past it. I deliberately walked into it, but they it's like there was every single wine and every single spirit, and all the gins and everything were all South Australian spirit.
I've got this beautiful vision in my head of like Matt Bailey on his phone going like Googling, there's a great bottle store here, a local bottle store, and like not walking into it, but just walking into the side of the wall because he's just on his phone, GPS going, must get access to spirits, just like a robot that doesn't know where to go. It's like the app hasn't figured out like two feet to the left and in is the door.
Yeah, actually there were some great little independent bottle shops still in Adelaide because rent means it's achievable. But I don't know. It's just like there wasn't any choice but Adelaide gins as a good example of that.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Joel,
Yes.
gun to your head. What's your desert island whiskey?
good question.
Ooh. I'm all about Kilcoman. I'm a big fan. Yeah, something cast strength by them, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm not very loyal. I move around a little bit, but yeah, probably that.
Probably better Kilhoman, sure.
That's like that's your weekender car.
Yeah, basically.
What's your daily drive with whiskey?
Oh, Glendronach 12 or
Okay.
something like that. I if I'm not drinking something peated, it'll be something light and sherried.
Okay.
But I drink a lot of different spirits, so I go through mezcal like nothing else.
Round table.
Yes, I know.
Round table. No.
Have we gone around the grounds recently? It's probably time we went around the grounds and what we're all drinking. So Alex, what are you drinking right now?
Elsa Bay.
Ooh. I rate that. I really like that stuff. I'm surprised that hasn't kicked off as quickly. I mean, come on, Eileen, COVID-19. That's a bit of a problem. So
Elsa Bay was the top selling whiskey at Whisky Live in 2019.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. Once you get it into people's mouths.
Yeah, it's under $100 a bottle. Like, it's just, for me, it's like shooting fish in a barrel. It's perfect. Also,
technically
really
perfect
cool.
whiskey.
Sorry?
It's a very technically perfect whiskey.
Oh my gosh.
You know what I mean? It feels like it's been made by robots, that whiskey. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but it's like the most like.
And if you ask about it as well.
Whiskey.
So I had a bottle of the old. So I had the release of the 1.1. They've now called this the 1.2. I've had that on the back bar at Mjolner for quite a while. Thank you, Jeff, who looked after whiskey for the Speakeasy group prior to me. He put a bottle on our back bar, and I was always like, "Whoa, this is pretty tasty," and doesn't have a lot of traction. And then enter 1.2, and doing a side by side of them with the different ppm and the ppm levels was insane. And I can tell you now that the 1.2 is so well balanced. Like, I'm not saying that the first release wasn't, but when you have that compared to the old one, it's just amazing. Makes it pop even more.
Yeah, big shout out to Jeff Fuel, lovely bloke.
God, he's amazing. I love that guy so much.
And Ev, I love Ev and Jeff. Just lovely people.
They're like my whiskey couple.
Yeah, no, they're fantastic. Yeah, cool. I love Elsa Bay. It's very like I say, it's technically perfect, and I don't mean that's not a criticism. It is. It's just like it's one of the most like feels like the most robotically constructed peated whiskey, and I got that Otto Van quip.
Well, are you calling it the Roger Federer of whiskey?
It is. It is the Roger Federer of whiskey. It's consistent. It's peated.
His background is all science, and it's so technically minded.
Yeah,
I remember when they did the launch in the UK, and his name escapes me now. Is it Mark David?
Roger Federer.
Brian Kinsman. Brian Kinsman. He was explaining it, and I've never felt so out of my depth at a tasting where normally I'm there in my comfort zone, and all of a sudden you're sitting there listening to this going like, you've mentioned so many words that I have no idea what you're talking about, but it was just so scientifically precise and spot on.
I've actually, I think I told you this one, Andy, but I've got a bit of a Nelson Bay story as well. It's like there was a tasting, which was just a trade sort of tasting of some of their replication. This was like maybe a year ago now, or a little bit more than a year ago, and they don't like, even some of the guys at the distillery don't call it a distillery; they call it a replication facility. As it's like, because their claim is like, this is for real. Elsa Bay reckon they can replicate any other whiskey in flavor profile and style. No, for real. They said they could make a Lafroig, they could make a Balvenie, they can make whatever they want, right? And it's like, okay, that's interesting. So they replicated as a project for this panel thing. They replicated Balvenie 12 Doublewood, and then they served up Elsa Bay Balvenie 12 replica to David Stewart. And David Ridley, our MD at the SMWS, was on the same panel and tasted it and said, well, that's Balvenie 12. It was tasted blind. And then David Stewart said, well, that's Balvenie 12 Doublewood. And that was revealed, no, that's Elsa Bay. Like we've replicated the Doublewood profile of that spirit for that purpose. It's like again, it's all the science that goes into it. But I was blown away by that.
I'm having like a little fit here. I want to call Ross instantly and go, hey, did this happen?
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know if Ross was there, but
I don't think Ross wants to know, to be fair.
No.
Yeah. We've just shat all over your brand.
Yeah. No, not shouting all over Balvenie, but it's the fact that they
turns out you're useless.
A couple of hours in a lab, Doublewood 12. Yeah, sorted, mate. Don't worry about it.
Crafted in tradition, or pet tradition of scientists.
No. It was that's what
at the back shed of the vaults.
I was like, back shed of the vaults at SMWS. It was just like, it was this tasting that they're involved with because we no, I can't say anything about that. But like there's stuff happening which was interesting. There was stuff happening which was interesting, part of that panel work, and they worked on building that profile, and if it was able to fool the master blender from Balvenie, then they've got something special that they can work on there. And I think it's kind of cool. It's like, it's when they release some core range non-peated spirit, which they very well may do. That's going to be, I think that's going to be really exciting as well. Because that'll be.
I'll ask Ross at dinner tomorrow night, and I'll see if I can get into his phone and steal
do it.
David's phone number and ask him. Question.
Sure.
To yourself, Mr. Bailey.
Oh yeah.
Do you remember an argument we had at like 6 a.m. in the morning at Qantas Airport over the distillery names, whether it would be Elsa Bay or Girvan?
The most I remember about that conversation was that I didn't recognize you from afar because it was 6 a.m. and I was bleary-eyed and
I was puffy-faced. Yeah, I know. Thanks.
I didn't say that, but anyway, I remember we spoke about a great many things, but I remember you mentioning Girvan Elsa Bay as a discussion point. Why do you ask?
What did we come to a conclusion on?
I don't think we did.
Okay.
Girvan Distillery.
What about Girvan?
So
quite big.
Sorry?
Girvan's quite big.
Yeah.
Quite big.
Yeah.
And Elsa Bay, is it made at, it's got separate stills, is that right?
It's made at Girvan though.
It's made at Girvan, but there's separate pot stills.
Okay, so does that, like if Society did a cask with it, would that equate to Girvan code number or Elsa Bay code number?
No, it'd be an Elsa Bay code number because we already have a Girvan number. We already released a bunch of Girvans, and they're G7.
And it'd be the same way, I suppose, as you've got Brookladdy, but Port Charlotte. You've got, Brookladdy, Bunnahabhain, and
we've got 5 codes for Loch Lomond.
Yeah, and another 4 in the waiting, probably.
Yeah, probably. But it's true. I mean, we've got 112 for Inchmurrin, 122 for Glen Douglas, 135 for Loch Lomond, and then G7 is Girvan, but like
you got Inchmowan.
Inchmowan, yeah, we've got G9, which is organic wheat, and G15, which is Rosdu.
Okay, cool.
So it might be. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I didn't even mention that the society had anything to do with it, but I don't know. Maybe in future. There you go.
We're going to continue going around the grounds, but not before Mark Westmoreland comments Clone Wars, which I think is a really good idea for a Whiskey Reality TV show, based on the idea that Talita and I were talking about last night on a stream about a MasterChef version, but for whiskey blending. Could be quite cool. Clone Wars, I quite like that idea. Going around the grounds, Joel, I know you're not drinking at home much at the moment, but do you have anything in your glass right now? Even if it's good old H2O, I'd love to know the source of that.
As a matter of fact, I do.
Oh, very cool. Very cool.
Lovely.
Classic.
It is,
Classic.
very much so. Palate calibration, if you will.
Yeah.
Everything back down to earth.
It's a little bit of like, this is where I need to be.
Yeah, exactly. I'm doing a fair bit of Aussie Apera cask finish stuff at the moment. So, yeah, just focusing on that.
Very cool.
PSA, Joel, this is the time of night where we just end up talking shit.
Yeah.
Oh, fair enough.
So,
So 8:23 is the cutoff, is it?
Yeah, that was sorry. We didn't get a chance to tell you that. Sorry. And by the way, Joel, there's a comment here on the SMW stream. It says, "Joel, you beautiful human," and that's from Michael Parolini.
Ah, of course.
Shout outs from Michael.
Before you said his name.
I'm going to come harass you at Old Mates Michael very soon.
oh, yeah, I was in there for a couple of hours on Saturday night.
Very awesome.
No, Sunday's the best. You get there. I got there at like 2:45, so only 45 minutes after open. You get there before all the Tinder dates arrive and all the 18th birthday parties, and you get a good solid 2 or 3 hours before it hits capacity.
That's at least a bottle or two of Pinot. That's pretty good.
1.5 and some shots.
And it's
Milne, what are you drinking?
I'm enjoying the great North Star. So it was the 31-year-old Invergordon that you kind of shared with me today.
Thanks.
And then just shifted on to Old Pulteney 18.
Good man.
Which I'm very excited. I think with this, I haven't had stock of that for a year, and it's just landing this week. So
does the 18 replace the 17?
Yeah. So they swapped. We used to have 17 and 21, and now we've got 15 and 18. But
and 25.
And 25, yeah. But the 15 is much more like the 17. The 18 is actually really rich. It's kind of lots of sherry, lots of fullness. So it's nothing like the 17 or the 21. They were both very, very light and very fruit forward. This is a bit more richer, a bit more kind of dessert dinner kind of post whiskey.
Loved the 17 years.
Yeah. Well, the 15 I think is an improvement. I know everyone will have their own arguments back on that, but the 15 to me, it's super fruit forward. It's got that citrus, it's got that orange, but it's got a bit more body and balance. So try it.
Try it now.
You know what makes sense.
Done. I'm done. Cheers.
Very cool.
Bales?
I started with a Dundee sample. I of a cask sample that is something that was consideration for panel, which has still got all its barrel char sitting in it, which is kind of cool.
Please tell me it's. Are you able to say which distillery?
Were you about to ask?
I was, and then I just suddenly blanked on the name.
You're gonna have a guess. That's all right. No, it's a Longmorn. Cask 97972, whatever that means. 57.
That is the correct colour for Longmorn, though.
It's a first fill ex-bourbon barrel, Longmorn.
Beautiful.
It's not quite refill, Scotty. Sorry, but it's 500 mils of the sample that was sent over.
Better than those horrid sherry casks they keep insisting on putting in Longmorn into.
We do have some sherry Longmorn on the way, but it's a little while off. And then that was what I started with, just a tiny taste of that sample. And then I moved to actually, this one's for you, Milne. Oh, that's why I'm on this. A 52.31, which is I Dream of Creamy is called. And there's a old Pulteney. There you go. Because,
It's called what?
I Dream of Creamy. Alex, I knew you'd love that one. But this one, I brought it out for Milne because I was like, well, it's from a distillery he's quite familiar with, and it's a 12-year-old from a ex-Sauternes barrique.
You've had that for a while?
Well, it sold out. It was last month.
Oh, was it last month?
Yep.
Okay. There was something of a similar name that I tried at Whisky and Almond. I like your.
Something of a similar name with creamy in the name.
I thought it was.
Yeah, I was just like, hang on, what? There's two with something with creamy in the name?
Just super creamy.
We're after 8:30, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's sort
as
of
good as. As good as.
Wow.
Yeah. Cool.
Is it when your mum tunes in or when she doesn't tune in?
She hasn't tuned in tonight. Let's not wake her up. Hopefully she's asleep and not getting involved tonight.
No, we don't get a whole lot of Pulteney. We get bits and bobs. 31 casks in 35 years is not a lot. So
yeah.
It says it's disgracefully glorious is the descriptor. It's rather disgracefully glorious, a fabulous old fruit monster. Sure.
Very cool.
Well, I was about to reach for a independent Glenrothes, which is going to be my next one, but because Milne's spoken it up so much, what was going to be my end dram is going to come through and be my next dram, which is the 15 Pulteney. And I actually maybe this is an idea for a whiskey round table in the future because Bailey, you were here that night. We went here. We were together on that night at someone else's house when I got quite into speaking to someone from the town of Wick about the town of Wick for about 2 hours at about 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, somewhere o'clock. You were inside, I was outside. There's a pool on the left. You know what I'm talking about. And I find that town fascinating, and the whiskey that town produces and has produced over decades and centuries is intrinsically tied to the whiskey that we see, whether it's 2020, 1980, 1890, So I think there'd be scope to maybe do a bit of a look into how a town influences its whiskey. Maybe we can talk about Wick, we can talk about Campbelltown.
And we could talk about Campbelltown with that, of course. But I mean, Wick is
like all over the place. Speyside with the Strathspey Railway, and Perthshire with Fort Nevis and all that sort of stuff. Fort William, Ben Nevis. I merged those two words together. I didn't. For anyone playing at home that's going to pull me up and who said Fort Nevis? No, I'm just trying to succinct things.
Just Australianizing it. It's just two things. Make it Aussie.
Why waste 4 words when I can do it in 2?
I'm fascinated by that as well. But I mean, there's I think mentioning Wick and Campbelltown are kind of like the obvious examples in a way, because it's kind of like, Wick is a fishing town, Campbelltown is a industrial sort of dock and port, and that kind of stuff is kind of, I think there's obvious influence from of that, if you like, of how the town influences the spirit in a way. And obviously that is driven by the people and the smell and the working relationship with the area. But I'm also fascinated by some of the more subtle examples. And the one that I've done a fair bit of research on because of the Vault 1682 event last year we did is Leith. Is where the vaults are. I mean, it used to have White and Mackay, used to have Glenmorangie's head offices. It used to have all these. It was a blending. It was like blenders everywhere in that area. and known for blending. That's why White and Mackay had a huge office there. United Distillers, aka Diageo, had a huge presence there. It's one of my favorite photographs, which never properly turned out. It was like really, really damaged photograph. Was the vaults before we moved in, and it's a photograph from like 1955. It's a black and white lithograph style sort of photograph, and there's about 12 or 15 young women, all blending downstairs in the vaults, and there's like maybe 6 or 7 giant vats, like giant tons, and they're all just like blending from the tons. And it was like this blending room. This is cool. Like, this is like if you found a bottle of J.G. Thompson of 1955 J.G. Thompson or something from that era, that'd be very cool. It probably tastes like garbage. A lot of those blends did, but it's been very, very cool I find that stuff fascinating. Anyway,
I was just wondering where Matt Bailey was going with that sentence at the start there, but I'm glad you roped it in.
Yeah, no, thanks. You're welcome. But
sounds a little bit like walking past Holt Street back in the day at lunchtime, and the line. That's what.
No Holt Street references, no Smith Street references. It was just like like sort of a string of of blenders, and it was mostly young women who were blending.
Yeah, and just a quick shout out to Mark Westmoreland again there, because as he points out, Thurso is only 21 miles from where Wick Old Pulteney is, but in that marshland that essentially divided that part of the country made it impenetrable back in the day, when we're talking about like original Thurso distilleries, I think influences the whiskey that's made in both of those towns today. And what I'm fascinated about is like Thurso, and I'm sure I'm going to get ripped up here by Mark when I say something silly, is a bit of a tourist destination for people. Unless you're into whiskey, no one's going to Wick for a tourist destination. I mean, I haven't been there myself because I never got that high end when I go to Scotland, but I've done a lot of Google Earth mapping around it. It's not a particularly pretty town. And so I want to know if like, as we all are, and Joel, I'm sure you're about, 15 years younger than all of us old bastards here, but like, if you are 18, 25, 30, growing up in Wick, do you, apart from you, Alex, who's obviously the youngest one of all of us, because you're only 17 and actually getting in a lot of trouble for underage drinking with you at the moment. But I don't think I say that quick enough, but that's all right. But yeah, the flow country, as Mark points out. But like, would you stay in town? And what does that mean for the future of these towns? And, does Wick and or like all the socio-economic things that are going on? Like, I think that'd be quite a fascinating discussion. Wick is obviously the one we're talking about at the moment, but like everywhere around Scotland, I did a bit of a chat with the guys from Penderyn on a conference call earlier this week. They're going to have 3 different distilleries around Wales. There are 3 distinctly different distilleries. And what does that mean from, being on the right side of Snowdonia Park to right down, the bottom of Wales? And, can they be sustainable? Can you drive tourism through all of them? I think it's a really interesting concept.
Well, it's also, are you there for tourism or are you there for whiskey?
100%.
D, all of the above.
Darren's a distillery.
Joel, I've got one last question for you.
Yes, shoot.
Who has been your biggest mentor in distilling and in this industry, or who's your big fangirl crush?
Fangirl crush? I don't know. I'm a bit of a recluse. I keep to myself.
Alex Dahlenburg is the correct answer to this question, by the way.
That's just coming in fresh off the wire.
I just got that.
Alex
I knew you guys would be waiting for me to do that again tonight, because you give me shit every week, and I was going to wait until it was the right moment. And yes, I've just done that. Yep. Just coming in now is Dahlenburg is the correct answer. Sorry, Joel.
My mistake.
Like for me, I fangirl over like Rachel Barry, every single Australian distiller. You are now on that list. Who have you looked up to in your career?
Honestly, I read too much and I forget names even quicker. Look, I don't really have any true inspirations. I just, I don't know, follow my feelings at the time with whatever I'm doing. Like I mentioned Corsair before, like I take inspiration from people's train of thought and then kind of go off on my own tangents. So yeah, I don't know. Does that answer your question? It's not really a very good answer. I can't explain my process or
No. Latest news in, the correct answer was once again Alex Dahlenburg. Would have got you out of that one. Yep, just that's confirming for our other correspondent on the other side of the country.
We've got AP and Reuters now confirming that. That's great. Thank you. Great.
Yeah.
Okay, then if you can't do that, what's your favourite car? And we're going to turn it into a whiskey.
I like this game.
What is your favourite car? And we're going
This was
to
good.
give its equivalent in a whiskey.
No, this is good. I like analogies.
Yay, we found one.
Yeah, think like a classic Jag or something like that.
Nope, skip that. We did that last week.
Oh, really?
Sorry, your answer. Your subjective.
Don't you know that everyone in the world watches us idiots talk every week? So you should be up on that.
Amazing.
Can you specifically give us a type of Jag?
No, I can't.
What I'm going to do now is I'm going to Google old Jaguar, and the first image that comes up, I'm going to screen share that.
E-type or an old Sovereign V8, or I mean, what kind of era are we talking, Jag? I mean,
if someone say old Jaguar, I'm just going to find the first image.
Yeah, thanks for the specificity there, Andy. That was great.
If you're in my seat, that's how it's translated. It's like it's just old. It's not new. It's now old.
Great.
Good point.
Could be 60s, could be 30s, could be 90s.
So if that's Joel's answer, that's Joel's answer. So we're going to leave this one up to Google.
Let's do it.
And this, I can't screen share, Bailey, because I'm not the host anymore. Sorry, stuff that one didn't think I went through. Can you go to settings and allow screen share for?
What's going on?
God, I remember my first time hosting a live stream.
I'm not hosting anymore. That's the host.
I think
we all know that.
I didn't even know I was the host. There you go.
Because I made you the host. Thank you. So this is the first image that comes up to exact words that Joel said there. So old Jag.
And let's give 10 seconds for anyone that's still watching us talk shit to give us their best whiskey that relates to that car.
I know what that car is. That is a 1967 Lafroig.
No, it's no. But are you talking about because that's not an old car.
Oh, that's what that whiskey is for me. But also Lafroig green. It's
just on that car. That's a remake of an old car.
Well, it's
easy. Easy.
Yeah,
It's a 15-year-old Springbank because that is not what you expected whatsoever.
Yeah. I think it might be Brewer. I think it might be Brewer Mark II because it's a remake.
All right.
We don't know. I'm looking at the image. I don't know really what sound it's going to make. I don't know what it's going to smell like, but I know it's going to make a hell of a splash when it starts up. So I'm calling whatever Brewer Mark II is.
Which I think they're just calling it Brewer, aren't they?
Yeah, but it's not Brewer, right?
But they're calling it Brewer. They're calling the new Port Ellen. So
yeah. So, but for everyone, it's going to be Port Ellen Take Two.
Are they going to do the same for a Rosebank?
I think they're still calling that. Why would they not ditch? Why would they ditch the name? Such an opportunity to write on their heritage.
All they have is the site because the stills got stolen about 15 years prior to the site reopening.
Is Georgie involved with the new Port Ellen?
Pardon?
Sorry?
Georgie Crawford, is she involved with the new Port Ellen at all?
Yeah. So Georgie's moved from Lager to Port Ellen to run.
Yeah, well, she was at Port Ellen like last year when, and she was at Face at the same time, but I just didn't know she was involved with the new.
Yeah. So she was always at Lagervölden, and she will now head up production for, unless something's changed since I haven't seen her in 3 years. But
I can't keep up with all that news.
Yeah.
So we have a bit of a comment here from, again, friend of the stream, Mark Westmoreland. And I don't know exactly what time it is in Thurso at the moment, but I feel like it's during work hours at the moment. But I love that you're spending it with us instead. Ford Capri Laser, Port Ellen 40-year-old.
What? A Capri Laser? What the? Okay, fine.
Yeah. And if anyone is watching this stream, you can see exactly what I Googled was old Jaguar. So it's exactly what Joel said. So this is not my choice, but yeah, I'm sticking with my Port Ellen or Brewer Mark II, bit of smoke, bit of brimstone, bit of fire, but it's definitely a remake.
It's like that's a very old Lefroy to me. P.S. I was looking through the tabs on your screen trying to see if like you had any porn tabs open or something.
You know, they're the same. They're the same.
Do we all just have a moment of? Oh,
notice the back where I'm just suddenly moving to the screen.
Oh no!
It is my absolute joy to disappoint you all. Which is something I've had to say to every girl I've ever met in my life. Moving on reasonably quickly. Funny story about Rosebank and Mark. I think we all know we've all met him previous life as a policeman. When he was a policeman, he did a bit of work in Falkirk, and he basically spent most of his time chasing looters out of the old Rosebank site, which is maybe. I remember you saying you don't remember how you quite got into whiskey apart from being in Thursday. Maybe there's something in those Rosebank walls that got in your skin, mate.
Or is that where the stills ended up?
Yeah. That's why I bring new ones into Rose.
Patrolling the site, you know.
Some of my favorite stories that come out of like when you meet people traveling in Scotland and whatnot are those ones that are just normal stories for them. But when you hear them, you're like, oh, that's just cool. Like there's a young chap, Andrew, who is one of the bartenders at the Vaults. And I was talking to him and I said, oh, what led you to here? And he said, oh, my dad's a distiller over at Balblair. And I used to try and break into Glenkeith when I was a kid. And I've always been interested in, you know, he'd roam around Glenkeith as a bunch of teenagers trying to break into the distillery and whatnot as a bit of fun. It's like, right. You know, like they just did it like, oh yeah, I'm going to try and break into Glenkeith as a bit of fun.
Jeez.
I love those.
Yeah, I mean, but that's Richard Patterson was the same. His dad was a blender as well, and so he grew up kind of going through the sort of blending warehouses with his dad, and so he kind of that education came from you know. I'm sure it's at a young age when he understood blending, but you know, to grow up in a blending warehouse as a child, it's pretty epic.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Guys, we say an hour every bloody week. We say an hour. We're getting deep into an hour and a half territory at the moment. So, should we maybe go around the grounds? Final thoughts. If you've got any, horoscopes you'd like me to read, I can quickly read them out.
Scorpio.
No, but what would you like to know? What would you like to know? Like, do you want to know about coming into wealth, finding love? Is your luck going to change? How
much whiskey I'm going to drink at my first whiskey event back tomorrow since COVID.
Yeah, nice.
Whiskey lunch tomorrow. I'm so excited with Angel's Envy. At Nora, hosted by the wonderful Simon Hopkins. Nice. So that'll be my first one out and about since.
I can't wait till there's actual Angel's Envy in the country as well. That'd be good.
It's in.
Yeah, not to me.
And
it's not,
on back bars.
Yeah, not to me. It's not though.
No, it's not going into retail, baby.
I know. That's what I say. I'd love to have some. That's okay.
Yeah.
Just start tagging all of Bacardi. It's fun. Yeah.
No, Bacardi doesn't know I exist. They have no idea. Simon does, so that's great. I just need to get him drunk.
Yeah.
And I still don't think that's going to work. To be fair, but,
he promised me that he has some rye for me tomorrow. Some of the rum cask rye finish. Sorry, rye rum cask finish.
Yeah, sure. Cool. Mute.
Cool. Can I just say a big thanks to Joel for joining us tonight?
Yes.
Oh, thank you, guys. Thanks for having me.
Hear your perspectives as a distiller. See what's going on there. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Keep up the good work, and remember the words "the oak barrel" when that beer department is figuring out the allocations for Ramjet and Dramjet and
all that stuff.
Ramjet.
Making a push up north very soon. So.
And think of Speakeasy if you want to do any venue collabs.
Yes, of course. We'll be in touch.
Done.
Any final thoughts from you, Joel?
Oh, really? Thanks for having me. I don't do these kinds of things too often, so it's good to actually speak to people about what I do. Get out of my cage a little bit.
No,
Does that mean you're going to go back into the cage straight after this?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. He's ready. It's like,
Someone's standing with a key being like, mate, wrap it up because
Wrap it up.
I'm with the yoke again.
just imagine like a tacit whip. It's just like, it's like in you go.
Whips and chains.
Milne, final thoughts?
Cheers.
Yeah, cool. A big thank you to everyone joining in. Nick Ayres, Jared Davies, everyone that sort of tuned in those last little bits there. Always a pleasure, folks, from Mark Westmoreland. Keep up the great work, drinking whiskey, talking shite. We can do that. Anyone on the SMWS stream, Bales?
Yeah, no, thanks to everyone who joined in on the SMWS stream, including latecomers, Franz Schurer, Darren Harry, James Finnegan. Thanks so much. Always appreciate it.
He's from Thurso. They make good whiskey there. So keep drinking whiskey, talk shite. So thank you, Mark Westmoreland. We promise we will do that. Everyone at home, keep drinking whiskey, keep talking shite.
Thanks, everyone.
Happy drumming.
Happy drams.